So by now I've spent some time off camera completing the lid design. I've got 3 different Zentangle designs taking up the entire lid or cap. I went with mermaid scales, I guess you would call them. I don't know what to call them. Again, that's Zentangle design. It's non-representative. You can't really name it. But something that looks like scales. I've got spiral designs, my favorite. I love spirals. And I've got my wavy lines. The lower half of the jar will be those same designs repeated again, but just rotated, shifted in a different location. So I'm still sticking with those 3 designs for the lower half of the jar, basically. I've got my chopstick handy to clean out those sectional lines. I want those nice and bold. I might go in there later with a skinny paintbrush and fill that in with acrylic paint. It's something to consider, so that's why I like those lines kind of wide. I've got my sponge handy, my water handy. I like to keep the sponge pretty hydrated so I don't always have to dunk my fingertips in the water. Sometimes I just need a little bit of moisture, and I can get that from my sponge. So as I mentioned in a previous video, I'll take that little bit of moisture from my fingertips and just kind of run my thumb over a section that's a little dry. That makes it easier to carve, easier to clean up. Now the lower half of the jar, you can see it's pretty darn dry already. And that happened as I was working on the lid. I was holding the lower half of the jar with with one hand, and then carving the lid with another hand, and that kind of dried out the lower half of the jar. My hands dried it out, the air, and just time. You know, this clay likes to expire when you're not looking. So I'm going to put the jar back in its bag, kind of put it on timeout for safekeeping with the sponge next to it. I'm going to let it live in the plastic for several hours, maybe a full day, and then I will feel comfortable carving Zentangle designs in the lower half of the jar. Right now the clay is way too dry even for my liking.